Miss Davis, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to talk with you a little bit about your involvement with the science fair and just science in general and how we can be better teachers for the students, not only here in Palm Beach County, but beyond. Let's start off a little bit about who you are and kind of how you got involved in science in the first place.
So my name's Jennifer. I am the program planner for secondary science, that's middle and high school science for Palm Beach County Schools. I'm also the director of the Palm Beach Regional Science and Engineering Fair. So how did I get into science? So my dad he passed away, a PhD in organic chemistry, and science was just a huge part of our lives. I have another brother who has a PhD in cosmic physics. So science and education and hard work were just the way things were in our family. And I was born in Ireland. We came here when I was pretty little, and I was brought up in the American public education system. And I met my high school biology teacher, he was a huge inspiration to me. I took every class that he offered, and I still think about the way he taught, and it informs a lot of what I do with teachers and with students. But out of high school, I was still going to be a racehorse trainer. I was going to do horses my whole life. And long story short, that kind of fell through. I ended up with a degree in biology and ended up tutoring equestrian kids who here in Wellington in math and science. I was managing equestrian team, things like that, and then just kind of realized I need a future. And education was my linchpin. Fell back on that and ended up teaching middle and high school science in Palm Beach County for about 9 years before I moved to the curriculum team here at the school district. And so I moved to this curriculum team in 2012. And in 2016, I became the program planner, the leader of the secondary science team, and the director of the Regional Science and Engineering Fair. So that's how I ended up here, kind of a twisty path.
Right. So those of us that teach science in Palm Beach County, we know you. You're very important in our lives as far as the science fair go-to person. But here's my first question. When you were a science teacher, were you good at coordinating your kids and leading them in the science fair?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't, because I didn't do it long enough. It's not something that you get good at like the very first year. And it also really depends on how much support you have from the school system that you're in. That's your principal, your administrators, your fellow teachers. So I was going it alone, and I didn't know what I was doing. I really didn't. I sent a PhD project that was done at home and all of that kind of thing. I had no idea, but you learn very quickly. And there wasn't at the time here in Palm Beach County, I think there wasn't a good system in place to help people and to help teachers. So no, I wasn't good at it. So I truly sympathize and I empathize with teachers who are struggling to get kids to do it.
Right.
I know how that feels. I really do.
Sure. And by the time I moved into the area, you were one of the very first people I met. You have a very good system, right? You have a good webpage. You push information out, and really I think you do everything you can from a centralized, place there in the county for the teachers, because, they're fighting a lot of uphill battles on getting kids to do authentic research just from resources alone, time and access to equipment. So
I'm going to chime in from a parent's person. Oh, go ahead. Finish first.
Yeah, it's very hard without a system. It's just otherwise it becomes just an overwhelming mountain, literally, of paperwork. And you get bogged down in that. And that's not the intent of science fair. Everybody is afraid of science fair because of the paperwork, and that's not the intent of the paperwork. So trying to make that a smaller part of it and make the kid and the research the bigger part of it is one of my goals, is to try to make that paperwork and clerical part as easy as we possibly can so we can focus on the kids and their research.
So from a parent's perspective, this was my first year where it took forever. My son finally made it right to the point where we had to deal with it. And you, of course, had to deal with COVID. So I thought I would give you a moment to kind of discuss maybe some of those difficulties with how you were able to do such a great job of continuing something. And I say that sincerely. I mean, like, not only did you stay on top of the teachers, but you stayed on top of our kids in a way that needed to be done during that time. So the fact that it even went off the way it did so well is really a testament to you. So how did you manage during those times to kind of keep that focus on the fair so that it could happen?
Well, there's a quote by Maria Semple. I'm going to say it wrong. And it's, she has a soft spot for logistical nightmares. I do. And so when problems arise, I will marinate and ruminate on problems for days, weeks, months. And so I remember Valentine's Day of 2020, February 14th. This was all just breaking in the news and it was just starting. And I remember saying to someone in this building, this will cancel testing. It will screw up this school year and it will screw up next school year. And that person was like, nah, we're just going to go home for 2 weeks. And I was like, you just wait. So I was already in February of 2020 thinking about it. And then, as you know, the state fair was canceled at the very last minute. So we had kids ready to go to state. And so all of that summer, I knew as it got worse and worse and worse, we're not going to have a fair. We're not going to be in school. How are we going to do this? And so brainstorming. And I always say to my team, and I'll say this as well, I have a team of people that work for me that are amazing and poke holes in everything I want to do. And that's the biggest thing is you have to have people around you. They're going to challenge what you're thinking and say, that's not going to work. You got to think about this and you got to think about that. And what are we going to do about this? And what are we going to do about that? And how are we going to solve that problem? So really it's about anticipating everything that could possibly go wrong. And what are you going to do about it? I also got, I will say, a little bit lucky in that we had started 2 years prior with using Google Drive. And so that decision to use Google Drive, because we had already been doing it for 2 years, a lot of other fairs and regions and school districts that had not been doing anything digitally really were behind the 8 ball. Right. So a lot of planning and a lot of sleepless nights and waking up at 2 a.m. and being like, oh, I got an idea. Let's do this.
Right. And even this year where the students made videos instead of the live presentation, I would like your thoughts on this. My thinking is about science fair. It is the ultimate in storytelling, because what I want is the kid to be in front of some judges, and I want that student to tell a great story about some problem and the question they asked, then how they got their data, and then why we should care about it, right? I think I always tell the kids, if you don't have a great backstory, then your project loses to an equally good project with a better backstory, why we should care. What are your thoughts on that kind of thinking?
Well, and I always say that to the kids, it's less about, kids always want to say, and here's my materials and here's my procedure. I'm like, the judges don't care. They can read that on your board. They care about you. They want to hear from you. They want to hear all the things that went wrong. They want to hear how it went right. They want to hear what you learned. They want to hear what you discovered. That's what they want to hear. So tell them your story. I say sell them your project, but it's the same thing. Right. Sell your project, tell your story, get the judge emotionally involved and invested and interested in you. Just like, why does a particular series work on Netflix? Because you get connected to the character. Same thing. You got to find a connection to the judge, and that's really hard to do in a video. That is really hard.
Tell us a story, and intentionally don't make it one of our kids, but tell us a story of a student, you don't have to use their name, that you were just really impressed with what they were able to accomplish, if you don't mind. I know you have several.
They put me on the spot a little bit.
I did. No preparation, just.
There's a couple that come to mind, a couple kids who I knew from the get-go did not have access to mentorship, resources, the kinds of things that you think of winning projects having. Okay. She didn't have that. She didn't have anything. and she kept running into problems. And I felt terrible because she was doing a human research project, and I had to keep kind of shooting parts of it down and be like, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. Nope, you can't do that. Nope, nope, nope. And so I was her biggest obstacle almost, that she had to get by me, but she stuck with it. And she kept trying, and she kept fixing her procedure and rethinking it and retooling it and reworking it until she had something that worked. And so that perseverance, and a lot of kids had to really persevere, and because they weren't with their teacher every single day in the school building, and their mom or dad isn't home to help them. So I'm all you've got. And here we are, we're not even face to face. We're doing this in Google Drive via the comment feature, where I'm saying that's not going to work. You got to think of something different. You can't do it that way. You got to read the rules, and I'm waiting for this kid to just a little icon to just disappear out of the top right corner. And this kid is done and they're never coming back. But this young lady stuck with it. She just stuck with it and figured it out, and ended up with a really nice project. Did a really good job.
Yeah, I would imagine you have some very interesting insight into this county is so large. There's 200,000 students. There's abject poverty at one end and billionaires at the other. And, it's always when you have that kid that's at home really trying to do a project versus you never fault the kids that have access to a university lab, right? You don't fault them for doing good work. But it's hard sometimes when you got a kid that really is doing solid work. They just don't have any resources. That's right.
They've got great ideas.
That's a hard thing to balance.
Yeah, they have tremendous ideas. They have great questions. They have great problems that they want to solve, or they have great solutions to a problem that we already have, but they just don't have the means to test it or make it work or see how it's going to go. So trying to connect them with adults in their community has probably been the biggest struggle of science fair since I started is, and I say this, you guys aren't there, but when I speak in person to the judges, I say, when we're at the fairgrounds, we have about 750 kids at the fairgrounds each year normally. And I say to the judges, so we're going to choose 42, 45 winners today. If you're listening, I don't really mean it, but I don't care about those kids. Those aren't the kids I worry about. I worry about the other 730. And what I say to the judges is it is your job to make sure they come back next year. And so for a lot of those kids, talking to the judge is literally the first mentorship they're going to get on that project. Sometimes it's literally the first bit of sort of professional feedback they're going to get about their project, because they maybe mom's helped them, or a teacher who may or may not be that invested in it, or may just not have the experience. So, that connecting them with adults in their community, in their field of research and whatever they're interested in is the biggest challenge of science fair, but has the biggest payoff.
One of the questions that I often have is when I think about, the disparity and how we can get more kids involved. In part, there's, and maybe it's just with me, there's like this cloud that hangs from the idea of the science fair looming. And it, not everyone has had, I didn't have success with it. So it's like when my kids are getting started, I'm like, no, how can we dispel that cloud, of fear, so to speak, not just for those who have the access, but for everybody to get more involved. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges is how do they buy into that they can do something within the fair?
Well, I think, again, it comes down to the adults, because it's not kids who think they can't do stuff. Kids, they learn that from somebody that they can't do it. Somebody told them. They didn't learn, that's not their idea. So who told you can't do this? Right. Is my question. And that's really important. So getting the adults, so that's buy-in from administration for starters. The school has to back it. It's gotta happen.
Right. I'm just curious, at the regional fair, do the public school kids, does the school ensure they have a ride, or are the kids on their own to get to the fair on the day?
So the teacher coordinator is responsible for making sure that they have transportation.
Oh, good.
So
Good.
some of them get a bus, some of them get a couple teachers to help them drive or a couple parents to help them drive. I get a lot of high school kids who show up in their own car and I'm like, I don't want to know that you did that, but okay.
Right.
So, but it is up to the teacher to make sure that they have transportation and provide it if they don't
Yeah.
or whatever.
So this wonderful opportunity that I think it's a great opportunity. Obviously, I was a kid that did science fair a lot when I was, younger, but the real issue today, it seems like we're stumbling on is equity to access, right? Not equity in judging or anything like that. It's just how do we get how do you get those really bright kids that just happen to go to a school where there's not a lot of emphasis, or there's just not resources, or frankly they're just too poor to buy the help they need.
Yep.
I know you and I both know some kids, resources aren't the issue, right?
Well, also getting teachers to buy in, because if it's not required at your school, then it becomes that seems like a lot of extra work. And I'm sure it is, but so it seems like there's a struggle there too. Like, is it required? Is it not?
Well, you're competing with everything else that's going on in the schools. Especially in middle school, you're competing with testing. One of the big things you're competing with is the 8th grade test. Mm-hmm. And you're competing with all of the other sports and clubs and other things that are going on. I always have kids who are like, I can't come, I got soccer. And then you get into high school and now you're competing with AP and IB and ACE, especially when you get to the end of the school year and you've got kids who are like, well, I got an AP test to study for. I can't spend 3 days at state. And I'm like, really? You could win a scholarship.
I always tell them they've done the hard part to get to there. They've already done the hard stuff.
Right. And then same thing with ISEF. ISEF always falls during AP testing. So there's just a lot of competition. First, that's the first hurdle to get over. And then there's a lot of, like you were saying, the stigma about science fair. And I'll tell you a quick story. A couple of years ago now, it was right around the beginning of December, and I was in a Walgreens, and I think I was getting dog food or cat food or something. I don't know what I was getting, but the next aisle over from me was the school supplies aisle, right? And I hear this voice. Why do you always leave it till the very last second to do your science fair project? It's due tomorrow. Why didn't you tell me? And all this, I hear all this chaos, right? And I'm like, oh Lord. And so I just quietly walk around the corner and I was like, hi, so I'm the fair director. Maybe I can help. This poor kid is standing there, and the science fair project is due tomorrow. And that's the stigma, right? That's the stigma is that science fair has, is that the kid always ends up, or the parent always ends up doing it. And, it's always the night before and I don't really want to do it. They can't think of a good topic, so they end up doing like some diaper project or ice melt, it's always that stigma. And so it's just so hard to get past that.
Yeah, the 3 potted plants. No science teacher wants to see 3 potted plants.
Yes, I do not want.
I did that project more than once. It's so true. And I think back, like my poor 8th grade science teacher, with whom I'm still friends on Facebook. I'm like, gosh, I remember how proud I was of this one project that it was just stinking up everything. It was a horrible project, but he was kind enough to me to at least encourage me to, well. Of course, with the teeth, everybody always does that one, right? The acid on the teeth and the soda one.
Yeah, eggshells, all exactly. Of that. But it goes back to elementary school, and it really goes back to the emphasis that we do or do not put on science and inquiry and curiosity and creativity as an elementary school kid. They're like little sponges. And they want to get out and explore the world. And somehow we manage to suck that out of them by the time they get to middle school and high school. They are not interested. And I'm a public school educator. I work in the system, but there are things about this system that I don't like. There are things that we don't do a good job of. And one of them is preserving that creativity and curiosity that every kindergartner has. Somehow, by the time they get to middle school and high school, in a lot of kids, it's been destroyed.
You, my friend, that's a very progressive thinking coming from the seat where from where you are employed. That's very, I'm in total agreement with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think school really comes down to ask a question and then have them figure out the answer, solve it. Just open-ended questions. I feel like open-ended questions and projects, because sometimes the kids come up with a better answer than I would have given them anyway. Why should I limit their ability to solve a problem? So
we've put in place this system that doesn't really reward that. The system will produce what the system is designed to produce.
Sure. And I read some articles about, well, our modern education system is about sort of like manufacturing factory workers, producing people to go into the workforce. And, times are changing, and I don't know the optimal solution for everyone, right?
I don't know. Yeah, what is the body of knowledge that a child needs when they graduate from high school to be successful in the world?
Sure. I think the age we live in, it's more important even than knowing things. It's about critical thinking. And I actually call it citizenship, right? Not only do you need to be, I'll use the word smart, you should be intelligent and educated and know how to solve problems, but you should understand a little bit of right and wrong, right? Or at least enough of history to not repeat the wrong.
Well, and the question I always ask is, what's more important? A kid having a predetermined body of knowledge, in other words, list of facts, or the kid having the ability to go and learn on their own what they need to know for whatever it is that they're going to do. Sure. So what's more important? I mean, I think we can all agree there's a certain body of knowledge, but I feel like that could be accomplished by like 6th or 7th grade.
Absolutely.
And from there, the ability to learn independently, I think, is more important than a body of knowledge set of facts. So a set of skills, perhaps, rather than a set of facts.
Right.
When I rule the world.
We work with some engineering companies, and they say, we can take these young engineers and we can teach them how to do their job. But what they want are kids that work well in teams, that are good communicators, that are problem solvers, things like that. Those are things that employers don't have the time to teach. They want kids that can do that. Then they can teach them how to turn the wrench or, build the airplane or whatever when they get to that specific employer.
Right.
So by the time this airs, it's going to be closer to August, back to school time, and people are going to be thinking about the science fair. So you'd mentioned the importance of having that adult. What other things should either parents or teachers or even students who might be thinking ahead, what should they be expecting would be helpful for them? What can they start working on now, or what are some other things besides that adult?
So the first thing is, please read the rule book. Read the rule book. I get a lot of questions from kids and parents and teachers. Can my kid do this? And it's like a 3-sentence description of what they want to do. I'm like, I don't know. Go write it up as a research plan. And that's that kind of part of the educator in me is like, you have to learn to write a proposal. That's what you're doing. You are writing a proposal. So no, 3 sentences isn't enough for me to know if you're going to break the rules or not. I don't know. So write it up as the full-on proposal and read the rule books about your project type and make sure that you're following those rules, and then send it to me and I'll tell you whether it's good or not. That's my probably I get 3 or 4 emails a day in the summertime asking that question. Can I do this? I don't know. Go read the rules.
Is the handbook, is that available for the general public to go on and access to? So they don't have to wait to go back to school to talk to their teacher in hopes, a parent or a
student. The whole website is updated right now. In fact, I'm just finishing the handbook, taking all the COVID-19 pandemic stuff out of it and putting all the other stuff back in. So that will be updated by, as I said, in our meeting by the end of the month, but everything else is up there and it's open to parents, teachers, students, mentors, scientists. It's wide open. Anybody can read it.
You want to give a plug to the website? I'll put it in the description too, but go ahead and share it with the listeners.
The only thing I don't have is the rules update from the state. So the state SRC usually comes out with a rules addendum where they're like, okay, so here's ISAF rules, and then here's the stuff for Florida that's really, really important, that whatever they want to say. So that's the only piece that I don't have. And I've emailed them asking for it, because I'm like, hey, listen, I got a lot of kids starting, and we had a lot of very specific COVID pandemic type rules in place last year. So which ones are sticking around and which ones are not, and I don't know yet.
So the website, did you want to share it out, or do?
Well,
it's a big long name, but if you Google,
Google
PBRSEF Google site, it'll come up.
Okay.
That's always the first return. Yep. I want to tell you a quick story about not what you would consider a traditional successful science fair student. In the past 6 years, I wanted to say I sent about 140 kids to the region, but this kid got disqualified in the 8th grade. One of my several kids that got disqualified, and you talk about a creative type. He got in trouble almost every year in high school with his science teachers once he left me, because I think he was bored, right? And the teachers weren't meeting him where he was at. Well, anyway, he's going to up to UNC Chapel Hill, and he's going to be a theoretical physicist. But he was always curious, even to the point of sometimes, his 8th grade project was disqualified. But brilliant kid, loved him, and really glad to see him. But I like what you said about being creative and us finding ways to keep fostering the kids to be creative. So
yes,
but
that's the biggest thing. We have to keep that alive. We have to keep that alive in the kids, because creativity and curiosity are the things that are going to solve the biggest problems that we have in the world. COVID, climate change, all of those things are going to be solved by people who are creative and thinking way, way, way outside the box.
I agree.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Well, as we get ready to close, we kind of always wrap up with a question. You've already given us some great advice for any of those students or teachers out there who might be looking for more information. But what might you say to that teacher, that first year teacher in the classroom, or maybe the first time a kid is going to have to deal with a project coming up, maybe just to give them some advice as to how they can persevere?
So the first thing is start early, and don't be afraid of it. Encourage your kids to seek out topics or problems within the hobbies and things that they do in their everyday life. So I always say to kids, like, what do you do when you go home from school? What do you do? I play video games. I play baseball. I go fishing. Whatever. Okay. Is there a problem there? What could you be better at? What kind of problems do you have with fishing or baseball or video games or whatever? Okay. What are some solutions to that problem? Could you test any of those solutions? So you're getting, those questions, to get kids interested in, because, whatever their hobbies are, at least you're going to have something that they're interested in, and then once they have a hobby, then you go read the rules and you say, okay, so here's how we have to do that. For example, if it's a fishing project, well, guess what? Fish are vertebrates. So we have to be careful, and there's some rules. But I've said to parents, most projects can be done. You can't kill a vertebrate and you can't break the law. Other than that, we can figure it out. As long as you're not killing vertebrates or breaking the law, we can probably figure out a way for you to do that project. And the more there's schools that like to say things like, oh, we don't allow human projects at our school, or we don't want to do vertebrate projects. And I'm always like, but those are the ones that win. Those out there weird projects where you're like, oh my God, I don't even know if that's legal. It probably is going to win. If you're wondering if it's legal, it's probably going to win. It's those creative. So don't stifle that,
So find the line between edgy and illegal.
Exactly. Right on that line. Be legal, barely.
Right. I never faulted a kid that got disqualified, right? I gave them great grades based on following the process. And sometimes, the middle school kid really wants to do a high school project, and that, we have to follow the rules. So I'm not an anarchist, but I'm excited about creative projects. And thank you. That's wonderful advice.
A little bit of anarchy is fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we really thank you for spending some of your afternoon with us today. And I know August is right around the corner, so things are heating up for those who are working on their fair. I'm sure we'll be talking with you again in August.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
We enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Thank you.